And we are live, I hope. I'm not sure. We had a bit of an interruption. We had a little bit of an interruption here. So I'm not sure if we're still live or not, but soon I hope we'll figure it out. Let's see. Maybe we're live, I don't know. Yep, it looks like we're live. I may have to switch over to my other connection. I hope I don't, but we'll see here in a moment. Yeah, it says the stream health is a bit weak, but I do see, yeah, we're buffering more than we should be, really. Hello, good evening, and welcome. This is, or good afternoon, or whatever time of day or night it happens to be, wherever you happen to be. This is, welcome to Republic News. I'm your hostess, Liviana. Let's see, we've got a person who is about to join us. Let's see here. Yep.
Oh, hello there.
Hey, how are ya?
Well, as I told you, you just caught me playing Vermintide 2, but I just finished. So, just in time, indeed, I think. I hope it didn't take too much time.
No, that's fine. The stream wasn't actually scheduled to start until about 3 minutes ago, but I started a little early with music to kind of fill the void and lead in. You were playing what, VT2?
Vermintide 2, Warhammer Vermintide 2.
Oh, I see.
That's the name of it. Kind of amazing co-op game, but lately it's been a bit it's been a bit bullshit lately.
Uh-huh.
You're probably asking why. Yeah, sorry for interrupting you.
No, I was just gonna ask, what sort of game it is, actually. Let me turn off this music for now, because we're already live and it doesn't need to be playing anymore. How the hell? Yeah, there we go. Okay, yep, remove that, please. There we go. Now there should no longer be music playing, although I believe it should have been soft enough for our voices to be heard over it. My boyfriend and I and several people, maybe you were here, tested it earlier in the week in an effort to get the volume levels adjusted properly.
Yep. Well, you were asking what kind of game it was. Well,
right.
It's basically Left 4 Dead, but in the Warhammer world, in which instead of zombies or infected, you fight a Skaven. Well, it's not true. You fight the Skaven and Chaos Warband too. No, a Chaos Warband that comes from Norska, I think it was. So there's you have that. It's basically it works like Left 4 Dead, except the weapons you have, you get them from the keep instead of in the field. You know what I mean? And from there, it works like this. You do levels. You get experience based on what difficulty you finish the level, how many heroes have you turned, how many tomes and grims you picked up along the way, etc., right? With those, you get boxes, which give you a randomized loot. That's it. Yes, it has also loot boxes, but it's not the loot boxes you can buy. That's the issue.
I see. So it's kind of it's a single player game, or is it multiplayer, massively multiplayer? What?
It's co-op mostly.
Okay.
So yeah.
So you can have a multiplayer mode.
There is no multiplayer versus mode. That's what it is. As in, yes, the Skaven and the Chaos guys have specials with them, but there's no versus mode to pit people against each other with that. You know what I
So
mean?
it's just PvE and not PvP.
It's exclusively PvE. Yep.
Okay. And you said it's a Total War version, expansion, what, mod maybe?
No, it's Warhammer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's not
Yeah, right,
Total War. It's
Warhammer.
Warhammer. It's not a mod. It's a standalone game, basically. It's a standalone game made by a company called Fat Shark.
Yeah, my boyfriend plays the Warhammer and Total War and several other games, Elder Scrolls Online and stuff like that. I generally just play Star Trek Online. I'm hoping to join him in Elder Scrolls Online sometime this month, assuming I have enough data on my limited internet data package to download that rather huge game. But I'm also thinking about going somewhere that has free internet and downloading it by using their internet. I do need to be out of town in the near future, and so I was thinking about getting a room at a hotel with free Wi-Fi and maybe trying to do it there.
That sounds actually great. Well, I hope that you actually get it to work then.
Yeah, he plays Star Trek Online with me as well. You know, I mean, so we do play some game together. He plays Stellaris. I play Stellaris. I've never gone into the multiplayer version of Stellaris yet. So, I mean, if I ever do, maybe we could play together in that as well. But yeah, I'd like to play Elder Scrolls Online with him as well, because I've seen some screenshots and I've been interested in the whole Elder Scrolls thing for a while. But back whenever it first came out, we still didn't have high-speed internet available in this area where I live, and where I live now anyway, and I lived there at that time as well, and so I mean, it all those games that I looked at said that for the online version or whatever, it required high-speed internet, and I was like, yeah, I don't know about that.
You mentioned Stellaris, right? I own that game, but have got caught up in other games with that. So besides, I had a lot of issues with that game.
Stellaris is a pretty fun game. It's a real-time, I don't know, real-time. You can, I guess, pause it, or you can speed up and slow down the time, at least in the single-player mode. But it's basically a real-time strategy game. And it's a lot of fun. It's also very addictive. I spent like over a month in it the first time I really played it. It was my third attempt. The first two were failures, and the third one I was like, bullshit, I'm gonna win this time.
The thing is, I played it, I liked it, but my issue with it was this. Wars in that game were decided by one big battle, if you know what I mean. Whoever won that big battle already won the war. If you know my complaints about it.
I mean, there comes a point whenever there are such a small number of empires basically left that it's just you versus 2 or 3 others, and many of them are often, what do they call, reawakened ascendancy or fallen empire or something, so they do have that kind of superior technology basically.
Yep, and my only other complaints I heard about it, well, the ones I have personally faced is that to me, I don't know. I've played other Paradox games, and in other Paradox games, in a war, if you fucked up, you could at least recover from it, if you know what I mean, if you played it smart. But in this one, if you lost your fleet, well, you're tough out of luck, as they say. You're tough out of luck, and there's nothing you can do.
You definitely need to
Well,
manage your resources and stuff too. I mean, the first couple of times, what really set me back was minerals. You know, you have to have so many energy and so many minerals in order to do certain things, build new ships and whatever. And I was like, man, I got to get more minerals. I did eventually find, in my third attempt, what saved me from losing that one was I did an exploration of a system and I found a lot of moons and planets and whatever that had like 7 or more minerals. Yeah, that was pretty good. And someone recently told me that with some of the new stuff that's been added to Stellaris, you can get even more than, I think 10 or 20 maybe was the largest number you could get of minerals back when I was playing. I think I've been told now that you can get 50, but I don't remember ever seeing that when I was playing.
let me guess. Let me guess. Did it blow up again? Yeah, I already warned him to wait a moment when your internet blew up.
I figured it died because the stream died.
Yep, that's what happened. Uh,
I did lose connection there for a moment, but so now we have. Okay, so you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves. Ah, shit. Am I disconnected again? No?
don't think so.
It said I just got a notice from OBS that it was. Yeah, okay. Apparently I just disconnected temporarily. I don't know what the hell that was about. Let me see if this other thing is working now. I'm going to check on my other connection because right now I'm connected through Ethernet. Right now I'm connected through Ethernet. I want to check and see if I can get on the Wi-Fi.
That internet connection of hers sometimes. I don't even know. Maybe it's revenge because of the net neutrality not passing in the Senate. Well,
I honestly think they are kind of fucking with me because about 2 months ago, which is shortly after Ajit Pai pulled his little stunt at the FCC with that shit-eating grin on his face, in spite of everything the people had been saying. I've had this internet service for 6 years. I've been in more or less the same place. I did move somewhat recently, but I'm still in the same general area. So I'm still using the same connection, the same tower, whatever, that I was using then. And so I've had 4G the whole time, never had any trouble until my previous Wi-Fi thingamajig, the battery started melting due to constant use, basically almost constant use anyway. And so I had to get a new one.
That sucks.
Yeah, but that was no problem. It was replaced free of charge and all that stuff. And so I've been using this current one for a little over a year. And I've had, 4G pretty much the whole time. Occasionally the number of bars on the 4G would be a little bit low, but it's been 4G. And then a couple of months ago, like I said, shortly after Idjit Pie pulled his stunt there with his shit-eating grin, I started dropping down to 3G at times, and sometimes down to 1G, and sometimes getting no connection at all. So about 3 weeks ago, I called them and I said, "What gives, man?" And so they had supposedly sent someone out here to check their tower. I don't know that I believe that. But, I can only get so much information from customer service, and they keep telling me, well, they're not going to tell us this, they're not going to tell us that. And I'm like, well, but anyway, so they said they had done their investigation and that my option was to buy an external antenna, which, I'd have to hire someone to come out here and climb up on the roof to put it up because I'm not going up there, right? So, and I'm thinking, well, I pay you guys a hell of a lot of money already. I don't really think I should have to pay you more, and why would anything have changed? I can see your tower from the window that I keep the jetpack in, right? I have to use binoculars, but it's there, and it's not really that far away. It's just, it's up on a rather tall mountain. It's kind of not easily seen, but it is there, and there's nothing between there and here which would be interfering with the signal. So, it's close enough, and there's no terrain or whatever in between here and there that would interfere. So I should still be getting what I have been getting. So, and most of the time the interruptions would come in the night, and I'm primarily nocturnal, so it was interfering with a lot of my stuff. Well, you remember the live stream we were on that got interrupted, and we had to restart it. So then so like a couple of days ago, I guess it was, I called them again. No, I guess it was three days ago now. I called them again, or I contacted them on a messenger thing, and I kind of started getting the runaround from them, and they're like, "Give me your information, tell me who you are, blah, 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 blah." I'm like, okay, this is, yeah. And so, they wanted me to tell them the whole story again, and I'm like, look, I contacted you guys like 3 weeks ago. I've given you all this information. Nothing's changed. You told me such and such. I'm telling you now, there is still nothing between me and the tower. I can see the tower, with a pair of binoculars from the window where I keep the jetpack thingy, the Wi-Fi jetpack. And it's obviously close enough, and there's nothing in the way, so I should still be getting the same connection. I've been in the same place roughly for 6 years, and I've had this jetpack for over a year now, and I haven't had any trouble until just a couple of months ago. I think maybe you guys thought you were going to get to pull a fast one on me and gouge me for more money because your pal Idjit Pie had pulled his little stunt there. And so they started telling me that I live in a minimal coverage area, and I said, well, I've 6 years it hasn't been a minimal coverage area, so what's the deal? Why would it change? And stuff like that. And they're like, I finally got somebody to tell me that it might be because they are phasing out some of their towers because they're going to be replacing some of the 3G towers with 4G towers, and and maybe with 5G towers, I guess now, and stuff like that. So I mean, it sounds good, but it's like I can't tell you how long it's going to be before we reconnect you, or before we can give you a better connection and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do in the meantime? I mean, you guys have a monopoly here. I don't have any other option except maybe satellite. I'm not even sure if they still offer internet in this area. And if they did, I would wind up paying them more than I pay you now, which is already god-awfully outrageous. Because of their overage charges. I mean, it's like you get 1 gig during the day, or during what they call prime time hours or peak hours, whatever, and then you have unlimited high-speed internet from, I think it's like 1 o'clock in the morning to like 7 o'clock in the morning. So you get like 6 hours of unlimited, which is okay because I'm a night person, but I'm also a night person and not just an after midnight night person, right? So, between 7 and 1 or whatever in the morning, I'd be sitting here going, well, I can't really do anything for a few hours except screw around on the computer without being online. And, it's kind of a hassle. So, and of course, you've got your, and the little mini satellite dishes you're going to have every time the wind blows or there's a storm or anything like that, your signal is going to be interrupted a bit. And these are obviously not satisfactory options for a person who does gaming and a person who is a YouTuber. So, I've gone through all this with them, and I've been as courteous as I could be, and I'm starting to lose my temper, and getting frustrated with them, and I start using language that probably some of them would think is not nice language, not ladylike or whatever. And, it goes on for a while, and so, like, I say, well, okay, and so I get up the next day, and sometime in the afternoon, I turn on the jetpack, and it shows I've got 4G, and I'm like, oh, wow. So I get on, on my computer, and it never lets me connect. And I'm looking at the jetpack, and, beside where it says 4G LTE or whatever, and it has the little bars, that tell you how strong your signal is, it always has another thing there that shows an arrow up and an arrow down. So it tells you if you're able to upload or able to download. And I've got neither one. And then occasionally I get one that's just one or the other, but not both. And it's able to tell me how much data I've used for the month, or until my next rollover, and tells me when the next rollover is going to be, which it wouldn't be able to do, I've been assured by these people, if it weren't able to connect. So it's obviously able to connect, right? But they're not allowing me to connect for some reason, and I think they're just pissed off at me, basically. So I called them, back, and I started raising hell this time, and so I've had nothing since then. That was 2 days ago, so I've had to use Ethernet since then, instead of my normal Wi-Fi connection. Let me take another look at it, and hopefully it's doing something. I don't see any option showing here on the computer, but let me walk over there and have a look in the window. You guys, what do you guys want to talk about besides ISP bitchiness and gaming? Or we could talk about gaming some more. I mean, I don't really want to go on about the ISP forever, because it's just me, kind of complaining about my own personal shit that you guys probably don't want to hear about.
Well, if I had to talk about something, well, today I just went to see Deadpool 2 in the cinema, because we just got it in Spain. No spoilers, promised. Personally, I found it hilarious. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say in respect for our friend over here. Besides of that, what else I've been doing? Playing with a thing called Orcs Must Die. That's about it. But that's about it. Besides of that, what else can I tell you? What else can I tell you? Oh, apparently there's a massive purge of triple X content going on Steam.
No, they did it. Damn them.
Apparently there's how you call it? There's apparently that Valve is taking down content with nudity and you know that stuff.
You know what's bad is I have a game for my Nintendo Switch that is a puzzle game that has grotesque amounts of nudity that I bought from the Nintendo store directly. Congratulations,
Really?
Valve. Nintendo is mainly suited for kids, and I was able to get a game with grotesque amount of nudity in it.
Yeah, well, apparently we found some culprits on the whole thing going on with Steam. When guess who it was? Apparently, an organization called NCOSE, aka Morality in Media, are taking credit for the removal of adult games from Steam.
It's just hentai. Calm down.
Apparently, this is the description they say. Morality in Media Incorporated changed its name to National Center on Sexual Exploitation in 2015 to better describe our scope and mission to expose the seamless connection between all forms of sexual exploitation. No corporation should profit from or facilitate sexual exploitation. The Dirty Dozen list includes Amazon, Twitter, YouTube, Comcast, HBO, EA Books. Our vision: all individuals have a right to be free from the effects of pornography and all other forms of sexual exploitation. And to that, you know what I say? Fuck off, tyrannical cunts.
Yeah,
I honestly can't tell if this is SJWs or conservative Christians.
I think it is. I think it's those intersectional neo-feminists. They seem to get their panties in a bunch over pornography, and I mean, you certainly, I'm sure, saw the news about how they got rid of grid girls at the UK racing events. Auto racing. They're now trying to get rid of strip clubs, which some people call titty bars in the United States. And they've already, someone was showing me something about how they're going to have changing the uniforms at Hooters, and I'm like, I've still got a bartender's uniform from Hooters, the black tank top with the black shorts. They're not particularly revealing, honestly. There's nothing inappropriate about them at all. If you work in a restaurant, you dumbasses, it gets hot in there, right? And so you want to wear something that is, going to keep you cool. I mean, when I worked in the pizzeria, the ovens were on 24/7, right? So it was hot in there all the time. Even in February. So, I mean, yeah, you and if you're moving around hustling, waiting tables and stuff like that, yeah, it gets pretty hot. Not so much behind the bar because you're not moving around quite as much, but then you have people gather around this, it's kind of a bar you're in the middle of, and you've got a bar around you, so you have to go back and forth to deal with that. But, yeah, it's not. And what the hell, porn? What about all the companies that are owned by women that make porn? Who is exploiting these women? How are they, like the same thing they were saying about the grid girls, this is exploitative and objectifying and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, there really isn't anything wrong with objectification. What you really need to be concerned with is dehumanization. I mean, women objectify men too.
Yep. Now, the thing, what I'm trying to think is, well, the biggest issue of this so far is, I was going to say something, but come on, brain, don't fuck me over right now.
Like, the biggest thing with exploitation makes no sense is because one of the biggest sports in the world for the longest period of time was boxing. Boxing was known for its ring girls.
Yep.
Those girls are not exploited in the slightest. In fact, most of the time, they're the biggest fans of boxing. They get to know like especially in the UFC. The UFC card girls The car girls will tell you firsthand. Oh no, we get paid. We get paid to not only look pretty, but we also get paid to watch our favorite fighters. They get to know the fighters. They get to love it. It's not always exploitative, especially if with sports, because the women that are grid girls, whatever, they go to enjoy the sport.
Sure.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
kind of sexist to assume it's just exploitative and they're just there to look pretty. No, what if they got the job because they're pretty and they like the sport?
right, and there's some
Yep.
talk about wanting to get rid of cheerleaders for the NFL now too, and with what you've just pointed out, these are women who are very athletic. They engage in dance, which is not exactly something you can do if you're a couch potato or, have no muscle tone and have no cardiovascular health and stuff like that. It's a very intense workout to do those dances and those flips and so forth. So I mean, what's going to happen to these girls whenever they don't have the option to work in these places? Where are they going to get a job? Do the neo-feminists give a fuck about that? No. The same way they don't give a fuck about how they're distorting. I've made this point before. The second wave feminists fought long and hard to try to convince American lawmakers and the judiciary system that asking what was she wearing is never appropriate in a rape trial, because women have been raped wearing baggy sweat clothes, sweatpants and sweatsuit, whatever, have been raped wearing flannel shirts, baggy jeans, short skirts, long skirts, anything imaginable. It's not about what the woman was wearing, and she wasn't asking for it regardless of what she was wearing. But so like now we've got these, and I don't know whether they're third wave or fourth wave, and I don't really know if there is such a thing as the fourth wave, but I've seen some stuff on the internet recently, read and watched some stuff on YouTube and elsewhere that suggests that there is a fourth wave, and it started about 2012, and that's when all the intersectional stuff came in. And I don't know if you guys saw my video on solidarity versus intersectionality, or intersectionality versus solidarity, but I pointed out in there that what happens when intersectionality, which sounds really like a good idea in the in the university setting when you're talking about feminism and stuff, it sounds like a good idea. It sounds like it's something to strive for and everything. But when you get out in the real world, outside the ivy-covered halls of academia, into the streets and activism, it turns into something that the person who came up with the term and the idea, Kimberly Crenshaw, says is not what she intended by it at all. And it seems like there's a difference between theoria and praxis. It sounds good in theory, but in practice it doesn't really work out so well, that kind of thing. So, I mean, these girls, these little kids basically, and I know some of them are in their 30s now, but these girls are raging about scantily clad characters in video games. And they talk about how there needs to be more diversity in the body shape and blah, blah, blah. Have none of these girls ever tried a massively multiplayer online role-playing game? Most of these games have extensive character customization. You can make your character short, tall, fat, or, oh my goodness, I fat shamed by saying the word fat, or svelte, or scrawny, or male or female, or black or white, or green or red or purple, or all kinds of different stuff. Especially in Star Trek Online, where we have the alien generator thing, where you can kind of make up your own character almost from scratch. It doesn't allow you to do absolutely anything imaginable, but you can do some pretty interesting things with the alien generator thing. For example, I have a character I made with it who has silver eyes and antenna like an Orion, and green skin like an Orion, and antennae like an Andorian, and pointed ears like a Romulan or Reman or Vulcan. And she just looks ordinarily humanoid other than that, but I've seen characters in there that have been made to look like They have. I saw a guy in somebody. I don't know if it was a guy or what, but you know that show called Megamind, the movie. You ever seen that movie, Megamind?
I think so.
Yeah, the blue guy with the big head, like he's got a big cranium and kind of a little goatee and stuff. I saw a guy, or somebody anyway, like I said, in Star Trek Online not too long ago, who had made a character which looked exactly like that character Megamind from the movie. It was really quite impressive. I've seen people make Spider-Man in the game. I've seen them make Darth Vader. I've seen them make Imperial Stormtroopers from Star Wars. I've seen various other superheroes and superheroines and so forth. And I don't think these people really understand what gaming is about. I think probably more of us are interested in MMOs than we are in single-player games and stuff like that. There's a lot of outrage about Bayonetta and 2B from Nier Automata because they're scantily clad. And again, right, what happened to this what was she wearing doesn't matter because it's not about what the girl was wearing. Rape isn't about sex, it's about violence. And, you know, that's what it is. It's not about being attracted to someone. It's about just wanting to do violence against women. It's not about sex at all. So what they're doing by bitching about scantily clad characters in video games is undoing this work that second wave feminists did with regard to that question in rape trials. And furthermore, do they not understand that there are women who play these games too? Oh, I know they wanted to ignore all of us who didn't fit their narrative back in Gamergate and pretended that we were sock puppets, or, you know, everybody that was in Gamergate was a cisgender heterosexual white male. Well, I'm bisexual, I'm of mixed ethnic origin, and I'm female. So there's one example of what happened to all those people from the Not Your Shield video, that there were gay people, there were trans people, there were black people, there were white people, there were Asian people. I'm sorry. I grew up calling Asians Oriental, and I know that's not considered to be popular now, but anyway, or acceptable or whatever, politically correct, whatever, I don't know.
Well, the thing with Bayonetta, real quick, is it was a joke. Like, the developers of Bayonetta intentionally over-hypersexualized the character and made her in on the joke.
Yeah, well, and I mean, if you talk to the guy, Yoko Taro, I'm sure you've seen some of the interviews he did about Nier Automata and why he had all these shapely women in his games, and his response was, I like women. I like boobs, or, you know, stuff like that. I think he said I like breasts and I like women. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I expect a straight man to like women, right?
I just love them.
Yeah, he's awesome, right? But yeah, let me, so, gotta go off of my little rant here, but yeah, it's kind of crazy the way that they're undoing things that people older than them who actually did have to deal with sexism and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not saying it's completely gone. There's still racism, there's still sexism and all this other stuff, but it's nothing like it was back then. And I've got this theory that these kids today are kind of jealous that they missed out on all the protests for civil rights and women's liberation and stuff like that back in the 60s, and missed out on the gay pride marches and stuff in the 80s and the 90s, when they were pushing really hard to get, you know, marriage equality and stuff like that. I think they are kind of jealous that they missed out on that, and they're trying to pretend, they're trying to LARP or live action role play that they're still involved in some struggle like that, and the struggles have largely been, you know, dealt with already. I'm not saying there aren't still issues that need to be dealt with, but most of these issues are, when compared to the really big issue, these are marginal and tend to result in division where we need solidarity. That's one of the things I talked about in that particular video about intersectionality versus solidarity, the fact that this identity politics and intersectionality, which, again, Kimberly Crenshaw never intended for it to be primarily about identity, but rather about the structures, But anyway, you can watch that video and see what she had to say, because I quote her, and I've given a link in the video description to a talk she did at the WOW conference in, I think it was 2016 or 2017. WOW is Women of the World. And she's talking about how that was not her intention in her original iteration of intersectionality. And I don't really have a lot of problem or whatever with what she had to say about intersectionality. Like I said, in the academic world, it sounds really nice, but whenever these people get out in the streets and try to put it into practice, it's either they don't really understand it well enough to do it right, or it just doesn't work in practice. I don't know. But yeah, we don't need to be fighting each other over, we don't. This is what happened to Occupy. The Occupy movement was everybody. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Jewish, Arabic. Everybody was there. Native American, whoever you were, ethnicity didn't matter. You're male or female, that didn't matter. You bi, gay, straight, lesbian, trans, none of that mattered. It was everybody there coming together to protest against the excesses of the 1%. And then all of a sudden, somehow, for some reason, and I've I've seen some people come up with some interesting conspiracy theories about it, and I'm not gonna go into those here, but for some reason, all of a sudden, this huge group of massive people that were standing together in solidarity began to split up into rival factions based on identities, and they were no longer cooperating against the 1%, but were instead squabbling amongst themselves as rivals over what scraps they could get from the table of the 1% and stuff like that. It was counterproductive to the entire movement, and that's why Occupy became ineffective, basically. Now, I've babbled and ranted long enough, so you guys go ahead and
Speaking of the thing of the mix of gaming and the outrage mongers, as you like to call them, okay. Just for you, I'm gonna use that term. I kind of forgot to tell you, but I've had a bit of a discussion with a danger here professor. Yes, I have those in my university. Because for this assignment, which is called contemporary contemporary. Let me tell what was the name of the assignment. Contemporary methods and tendencies, which is basically about this thoughts of the school of thoughts that happened in the 19th and 20th century, and they've shoehorned us a bit of a discussion of the historical veracity in video games, for instance. And he kind of started well at first, but then he pulled out of his arse some of the stats that I've seen in another newspaper, claiming that apparently half the people who played video games were women. And I'm really sorry, but if you count playing Candy Crush or playing Clash of Clans, is that, well, maybe I can understand it. But the thing is, in every game I've won, it's a dick fest. It's a dick. So I came to him to speak about these stats, and I'd like to think that I managed to get him a bit interested into the whole thing of Gamergate, but I kind of think he already had made up his mind about it when he told me that he thought it was a club owned by white privileged males.
Yeah, well, I've been gaming for a long time, since the 70s. I mean, and back then it was all, your local individual consoles, like those old Ataris that you played Pong on and stuff like that. So it wasn't like multiplayer or massively multiplayer stuff back then. and I've been involved in RPGs since the original first edition AD&D hardbacks were coming out, because all those rules had been published in what was, I think, still called the Dragon. And by the time the hardbacks were coming out, I think they changed the name to Dragon Magazine. And before it was the Dragon, it was Tactical Studies Review. I may have mentioned this before in a previous stream, that TSR, the company that originally published Dungeons and Dragons and Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, was nobody ever really knew what TSR stood for unless they'd been involved in this thing from an earlier period. It stood for Tactical Studies Rules. And it was originally a wargaming company. You know, they would have all these little miniature figures, you know, made out of lead, and they would paint their figures, and they would, you know, put them on these little hex maps and, you know, roll dice and do stuff like that. And over time, they developed this into Chainmail, which was the predecessor to Dungeons and Dragons, and then, of course, Dungeons and Dragons, and then Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and then the floodgates were opened. You had all kinds of other games, like some really obscure games like the Fantasy Trip. You had Shadowrun. You've got the World of Darkness stuff with Vampire the Masquerade, Vampire the Dark Ages, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the point that I'm making is my brother had the Atari, but I played it too. And so did my nieces, right, as well as my nephews. And yeah, it was like... there was nothing about it that was exclusively male. Whenever I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, you know, I wound up in college not too long after that, in the 80s, and we had, and I mean university for those of you in Europe who use the two terms to mean different things, but we had girls and guys who played Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and various other gaming systems, Middle-earth role-playing, for example, that was published by Iron Crown Enterprises. Warhammer was a big thing, but we didn't really do it so much in the United States. It seemed like it was mostly a British thing back in, and I don't mean Warhammer, the game that you all know, that's a video game. I mean the game that was a role-playing game, and it involved miniatures and stuff like that too. I mean, original Dungeons and Dragons and Chainmail and AD&D, some of those gaming sessions involved those lead miniature figures as well. I mean, they weren't required, of course, but it was something that people did occasionally. So those things were there. And I mean, like I'm saying, we had people in our groups in university who were male and female, especially there towards the end of my time as an undergraduate, when a lot of people had gotten married. You know, their spouses would want to get involved too. So there were quite a few girls besides me who were playing. And I don't think it's ever been exclusively a male-dominated thing. I mean, when I worked in the gaming industry myself, I worked for a company that did a MUD first, and then later on I moved to another company that published a variety of games, most of which were MMOs. There were a lot of girls who were players, and there were a lot of women involved in the company itself. I mean, one of the product managers, the very first product manager at the company for the very first game that we had was a woman. You know, so I mean, it's not like a lot of the game masters were women. It's not like we had any kind of sex segregation, and we had games that were, you know, we had all kinds of stuff. We had kind of anime-like MMOs. We had sort of high fantasy MMOs. We had PvP MMOs. We had all kinds of stuff. Eventually we had a lot of you know, kind of first-person shooter type games as well. And I don't think a lot of women played those games. I don't think a lot of girls played those games, but there were some. You know, so I mean. So, I mean, I know that just from the metrics that we had, who the people were that were playing. And yes, I know they were actually women because they were buying stuff with their credit cards and you get to see their names, right? So you know who they are. And whenever their account has been compromised and they're trying to get it back, they have to tell you their name, right? Based on their credit card use in the past, you can verify that it's really the right person and stuff like that. So, I mean, I don't think certainly there are a lot of girls and women who play things like Candy Crush, or they play these mobile phone games and shit like that. But I don't think that even more what you might call serious role-playing games or real-time strategy and stuff like that is exclusively male, and I don't think it ever has been. There may still be a majority of guys that play that type of game, but I don't think it's quite as uneven as you may think it is. So, I mean, I don't know. I thought my boyfriend might be joining us too, but he's gone into Star Trek Online instead of coming to join us. He said he was going to eat and then he would see if he would come into the stream or not, but I see he's in Star Trek Online now. So anyway, I was going to point out there are some stories that were posted today into the Discord that looked interesting. Like, for example, I posted some of these Mundane Matt Jarbo, or as the YouTube saints call him, Matt Yarbo, did a video today, I guess it was today, I'm pretty sure it was today, called Evergreen Didn't Learn, Day of Absence Continues. That's a pretty interesting video. If anyone hasn't seen it, I recommend that you check it out. I've got a video in my repertoire here, so to speak, that talks about the issues at Evergreen a year ago. There was a video that Tim Pool came out with today also, called Sargon of Akkad, Jordan Peterson in the Crosshairs, where he talks about... Shit, I'm disconnected again, huh? No, I'm not.
I'm gonna fucking watch the film. No matter how much money you spend on fucking marketing this name.
We're having a bit of a connection issue. I'm not really sure what's going on. I've got a red indicator on OBS, and it just told me that I had lost connection. Let me see what's going on at...
Yeah, go on.
I was going to say that no, it says we're offline at YouTube, so I don't know what the hell is going on. Shit. Well, I am recording this too, so I can always just upload it as a video later, hopefully. So I'm just going to keep talking. We will just keep talking as long as we're connected here. I was going to say that this video that Tim Pool put out today about Sargon of Akkad and Jordan Peterson and stuff, he was talking about how, okay, so apparently we've reconnected now. So I guess we'll be streaming again in 3 parts on YouTube. So anyway, this video that Tim Pool put out today, Sargon of Akkad, Jordan Peterson in the Crosshairs, that's the title of the video. It's like these media outlets are trying to portray a number of people as alt-right who actually are not. If you have encountered some alt-right people on the internet, as I'm sure you both have, I have no doubt that you've seen some of them refer to Sargon as Sargoy of Mossad, rather than Sargon of Akkad. These people seem like they absolutely despise Sargon. So, I mean, he's not alt-right. A couple years ago, he was centrist, and I guess he kind of still is, but I think he may be more right of center now than he was back then. He was just slightly left of center back then, according to his political compass test. But then I saw a video that he had done in 2017. Someone showed to me today, Andrew, showed to me today.
And train them. They're literally child soldiers.
What?
Oh, we were talking about the 7th film of Star Wars, because To him, the Black Stormtrooper didn't make any sense. But as far as I know, they tried to justify it by saying that the people that were fighting for the First Order were literally abductees. They were child soldiers.
Okay, so apparently my connection is not even remotely stable this evening. Jesus fuck. I was talking about the Sargon video that Tim Pool did.
It's bad.
Do what?
Yep.
This
Yeah,
video
go
is
on.
he's pointing
Yeah.
out that the media
You were talking about that one.
The media is characterizing people like Sargon and Jordan Peterson and Brett Weinstein and his brother Eric, I think is his name, and a few other people as alt-right when they are not in fact alt-right. I mean, Sargon a couple of years ago did his political compass test and it showed him as pretty much right in the center. He was slightly to the left and slightly into the libertarian, social libertarian, as they call it, quadrant. So he was left libertarian, but just barely. So he was really basically a centrist. And he said, yep, that's what I've been telling people. But I saw a video by him today, which Andrew showed to me, about, it was a video he did back in 2017, late in the year. Yeah, we're not actually online at the moment. It says we're starting. The stream is not online. So I probably will just take down the stream itself and re-upload as a video. But anyway.
Yeah, that's what the best.
Anyway, as I was saying, the alt-right, if you've run into any of these people online, as I'm sure you both have, I don't doubt for a moment that you've probably heard some of them refer to Carl Sargon of Akkad as Sargoy of Mossad, and it seems to me that they absolutely despise the guy. I don't think they like him at all. I don't think he's alt-right. I mean, the video I saw today was him taking the My 8 Values test back in late 2017, and it shows him as I think 60 some odd percent progressive and just a little bit more left than right in terms of economics, and I don't remember what the others were, but they were basically right in the middle. So I mean, yeah, it seems like he hasn't changed as much as I thought he had, but it's hard to tell. And then also there were some other links that I didn't post into the public channels yet. Let's see, I may not actually be connected again. I don't know. Yeah? You guys can still hear me? Maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, so there were some other
loud and clear over here.
Yes.
Some other articles and videos and so forth that I posted in the non-public channels today that I was going to get around to posting into the public channel later. I have a channel in this Discord that is private just for me. I post stuff in there that I'm going to download later or whatever, and post into the Google Plus groups that I run later. But I usually do this while I'm on my phone, and I don't post stuff on Google Plus from the phone because for some reason Google hasn't figured out that they need to make it possible for you to paste a link into your post from your phone, whereas you can do that on Twitter, right? So anyway, so there was a video that I found today, and I may have posted this in the philosophy channel of this Discord as well as in the private channel, which only I and the moderator team can see. It's from Reason TV, a video called "Fight Hate Speech with More Speech, Not Censorship," and it's ACLU former leader Nadine something or other who gave a discussion, an interview, I guess, with Reason TV, and talked about this, and I thought that was a good video. And then let's see, this probably is of very little interest to some people, but for those who like my channel, which is mostly philosophy, I did find an article at Aeon Eon, whatever you want to call it, Eon, called Is Nature Continuous or Discrete? How the Atomist Error Was Born. And it talks about how the discovery of a text, Rerum Naturae, disconnected again from OBS, so I don't know what's going on. It talks about how this text, which was discovered, I think in the 1800s, was mistranslated in spite of the author not mentioning the word atom or particle. They had read that into it, and so all the translations refer to those things which were very Epicurean and atomistic, and those words didn't actually occur in the text itself, so that's going to be somewhat interesting. Then there's an article at Truthdig by Lee Camp from Redacted Tonight, who wrote, I know which country the U.S. will invade next, and we all do, it's Iran. But then he tells you why. He says it's because they're getting rid of the petrodollar and they're going to start using their own thing, and he points to all these other countries the U.S. has invaded over the past however long, I guess 18 years now, and all of them have been invaded after they stopped using the dollar to buy petroleum, which is interesting because I believe the EU is now going to start buying petroleum with euro dollars instead of the American dollars. And I don't think the United States is going to invade the EU. I mean, I hope that our politicians have enough sense not to do something stupid like that. But, I hope they don't have... I hope they have enough sense not to do some other stupid things that they do too. So, I don't know. Anyway, you guys... better over there might want to start building some bomb shelters or something. I don't know. There's
I don't know.
Also an article here from USA Today. Let me see what this is. I think this was something about Bernie Sanders. If it will load. It's loading slowly, maybe.
He's fallen and can't get up?
No, I'll get back to it in a minute. Then there is a video I found by a guy called Sage Console. He had posted it in Mundane Matt's Discord, where I am also. And it's a speculation about how the Norse gods came to be what they are in the historical, poetic and prose Edda and stuff like that. So this one from USA Today says... Senator Bernie Sanders says this one issue keeps progressive policies from advancing, and it's by some Nicole Gaudiano, nice little Italian name there, and blah blah blah. He says a singular roadblock to achieving success on a host of progressive policies is not the Trump administration, it's American oligarchy. Yeah, so he's going to be talking about the 1% again, which again was the thing that the Occupy movement was concerned with. Now I will remind you, I know Union Aerospace has heard me give this spiel many times, but the word progressive is a term that is used by at least 3 different groups in the United States, and they are very, very different. So don't think that when I say progressive in the sense of Bernie Sanders, I'm not talking about the regressives who call themselves progressives, the so-called social justice warriors, whom I call postmodernist and post-structuralist inspired outrage mongers. I got that term, by the way. I heard you using it, Union Aerospace. That's actually not my own term. That's a term I got from Nick Goroff, who is Wizard of Cause. And I had been thinking about using the term outrage warriors, which I had seen Liana Kersner use. And then I was talking about that with him, and he said he preferred the term outrage monger. And I thought, that really does sound a lot better. And it kind of, it's kind of like the whole hate monger, outrage monger. Yeah, it's perfect. It's not complete, but it's close enough. So I just tacked on that they are inspired by post-structuralism and postmodernism, but even still, it's still not complete. There needs to be something in there about victim playing, I think, because they do that a lot, right? And
Yeah.
so then there was a video from Jimmy Dore today called "Iran Switches from the Dollar to the Euro," which again harkens back to the article by Lee Camp. And so then, yeah, so that looks like about the extent of what I had. Are any of those stories of interest to you guys? You want to talk about any of those things?
I mean, about the thing of Iran being invaded, well, I personally don't think the US is that retarded to do it.
Oh, I can
I
tell
think
you.
let the Russians.
I can tell you for sure that Iran is on the table. I mean, you got General Wesley Clark, who said this some time ago, that the United States was going to invade 7 countries in, I think it was 5 years, and Iran was one of them, so was Syria. But I can tell you that, okay, so I think I may have mentioned this before when you were in a stream, Union Aerospace, so if it's redundant to you, please bear with me. I don't know if Berserker is familiar with the information. So, like, I don't know if you know about the Project for a New American Century, PNAC. Have you heard of them? Berserker?
Very vaguely.
They were a neoconservative think tank. They were started sometime in the late 90s, I guess, and in September of 2000, they wrote a paper and published it in which they talked about how it would be a great idea to put an oil pipeline running from Iraq through Afghanistan into the Indian Ocean, to a port, right? Not into the ocean itself, but to a port on the Indian Ocean in order to bypass OPEC, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and all that stuff. So the U.S. could get their petroleum from this oil pipeline coming out of Iraq. But of course, that wasn't going to happen unless the U.S. went into Iraq and Iran and, fucked around there. Which, as we know, did happen as a result of what happened a year later on the 11th of September 2001, the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. And, I remember at the time, I woke up that morning and I went into, oh my God, I went into a chat room on AOL. This is back in the days, right, when they still had chat rooms on AOL and Yahoo. It was a place that I used to hang out quite a bit. And the night before, we had been talking about how there was probably going to be a revolution or civil war in the United States sometime in the future. And I had said, I believe there is, and I do believe that it's a bad idea because the wrong people will start it. So, I mean, and I was thinking at the time about shit that had happened in the mid-90s with, like, the bombing of the Murrah building in Oklahoma City, right? So that's kind of what I had in mind, was kind of the white supremacist Aryan nations type people would probably try to start some kind of revolution or civil war. But so when I got up that morning, I didn't turn on the television. I went and got on my computer and got online, and I went into this chat room, and everybody was freaking out, and the chat was just moving really fast, and I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? And they said, turn on your computer. And I said, what channel? And they said, I'm sorry. They said, turn on your TV. And I said, what channel? And several of them at once said, any channel. So I went into the other room, turned on the TV, and yeah, sure enough, I was still standing there in somewhat of shock, thinking, well, I was right. This is the Civil War that I had been talking about the night before. And I didn't see the first plane, obviously. I don't think anyone get to see that live on television. But I was still standing there in front of the television when the second plane flew into the second tower. And I was like, oh, fucking shit, what's going on? At this point, I was like, this is maybe a little more coordinated than I would think that the people like the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord, and those kind of white supremacist groups from back in back in my university days would be able to accomplish. But I still kind of thought it might be that kind of white supremacist groups, doing it. So, nobody knew yet, and there was a lot of talk about how it was Muslims. The media was speculating that it was probably Muslims. There was also a lot of talk that it might have been, something like Timothy McVeigh and that bunch doing their thing. So, there was some support for my idea, I guess, basically, that it might be those guys doing it. So, after I stood there in shock for a few minutes longer, I finally went back to the computer and went back into the chat room, and so I knew what people were talking about at that point. And so we all talked about it, and we were all kind of speculating and trying to figure out what was going on and stuff. Yeah, it was very interesting. But anyway, so as a result of that, we did go into Afghanistan and then into Iraq with no real justification. The media and the politicians were doing their damnedest to convince people that Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11, and I'm like, but he didn't. We all know he didn't. Okay, there's no. Those guys all came from Saudi Arabia, according to the driver's licenses and or whatever it was they found. They found people's wallets they claim were the terrorists, and they were all people from Saudi Arabia. Maybe one or two.
They were from Afghanistan.
One or two of them were from Afghanistan, but the rest of them were Saudi nationals. And so, at any rate,
They were Saudi nationals from Afghanistan, though, because they're people that were trusted by Bin Laden.
Yeah,
like he trusted them because they all kind of sort of fought the Russians
the
at one
Saudis
time.
were promoting. I mean, this is one of the things that I saw recently, also in some news article, or may have been on a video, that intelligence veterans had told President Trump that Iran is not the #1 supporter or promoter of terrorism in the world. That's actually Saudi Arabia. So, I mean, yeah. But anyway, yeah, the thing that the PNAC had put forth in their paper was now possible, that we could go into Afghanistan and Iraq and fuck around there until we got a pipeline that we could bring out of Iraq, which has massive amount of oil reserves, down through Afghanistan to a port on the Indian Ocean, and thereby bypass OPEC. What is not as well known is that there were several members of the PNAC who got cabinet appointments in George W. Bush's administration. Okay, the PNAC went out of business. I mean, they disbanded or whatever, disestablished themselves. I don't know exactly what you would call it, but they ceased to function, and their website went down in, I believe it was 2007 or 2008. The very next year, a new think tank was formed, also neoconservative think tank. Many of the same people who had been in the PNAC were members of this new think tank. It was called Center for a New American Security, or CNAS. This one is much less well known. In March or April of 2016, they published a paper in which they engaged in historical revisionism about the wars in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, the business in Libya, and started talking about how, and I'm going to quote again, the phrase that they used was, quote, non-Russian pipelines, end quote. It was important for us to establish non-Russian pipelines in Syria and Iran. Now again, this is something that the United States is not really going to be able to do apart from possibly diplomacy, but you know what diplomacy means in these days with the neoconservatives. It means, diplomacy means offensive war rather than sitting down at a table and talking things out. So again, we would have to go into Syria and Iran in a military presence, or with bombs or missiles or whatever. And So, I mean, back in 2012, there was an article in Global Research that was already predicting that the next war the United States got into would be in Syria. Now, Syria is kind of an interesting situation. We've had CIA financing and training and arming one group of so-called rebels, and Pentagon arming and training and financing another group of so-called rebels, and these two groups of so-called rebels have been fighting each other. I mean, it's kind of fucked up, right? But so now there's this thing about Iran having
Yes.
dropped the dollar as a means of buying petroleum, and so there's this history of the United States attacking nations that have stopped using the dollar to buy petroleum, and so it's the excuse basically that they need. Now, what Lee Camp said in his article was that it's not really about the petroleum and it's not really about the natural gas, it's really about the banks and the dollar itself. But so I don't know. So what do you guys think about this?
But as I was gonna tell you, I think that the idea of invading Iran is it's not only impossible, it's fucking retarded to begin with. For example, we have records of the Iran-Iraq war, in which apparently the fucking Islamic militias of Iran were running through minefields. They were using their own bodies to blow up entire minefields. How do you fight against that shit? You know what I mean?
It's very easy, actually. You let the one people they fear the most in the world destroy them because they can very easily. They let the Israelis handle it. If the Israelis want to turn Iran into desert glass, let them fucking do it.
That could be true, but in the end, one thing is overrunning Iraq. The other story is overrunning Iran. Because as far as I know, Iran is larger than Iraq, with larger human reserves. As far as
Same
I
people,
know.
though. Like, the same morals, the same tactics. They're all the same.
No, I'm not sure. I think Iraq was no, was Sunai. Sunai, I think it's called.
Sunni.
Sunni. Yes, thank you very much. It's just I don't know how you say it in English. Thank you.
That's just a different sect of Islam. But it's literally the same people, just different sects of the same religion. I mean, the only real fighters out of the entire Middle East are the Afghans. The Afghanis stood up to the Russian war machine in the 80s, and that was impressive. Granted, the United States did arm and train them a great deal, but they still defeated the Russians.
Yeah, well, about that thing, we don't even know if what the fuck did the Russians wanted to do there. All they do was support this how do you call it? Support this stalled in their way. I think pro-communist guy and to fight against.
Pretty much, yeah. Like they were trying to set up a communist empire there. I
the whole issue thing. And we all know what a bastard Stalin was. But even so, how many Russian troops were in fucking Germany by the time of the end of the war?
So I lost connection again for a moment. I mean, I lost you guys. It was saying that I was connected, but I wasn't getting any voice from you guys. So I don't know what happened there. As far as the say like Osama bin Laden and those guys, the so-called Al-Qaeda, we used to call them the Mujahideen. I was live and in college while some of this was going on, and then in between college and graduate school for a little bit more of it, and it was the CIA training them to fight against the Soviets. So I mean, the CIA under Reagan and Bush trained them to fight the Soviets, and then Bush again as president instead of vice president, they were continuing to work with the Mujahideen. And Bush was the director of the CIA himself at one point in the past. I mean, before he was vice president, much less president. The elder Bush, I mean, George Bush the elder.
That's true. Well, the thing is, with the whole thing of the Mujahideen, in the end, it's like I told our friend over here. I think the U.S. intelligence services have a serious lack of long-term planning, because as he said, all they did was all the American intelligence service did was, hey, get some guns, fuck some Russians up. The end.
Yeah, well, the Afghans, whatever I don't really know what to call the people from Afghanistan. Are they Afghans?
The Afghans.
Yeah, okay. Because an Afghan to me is a thing that my mom used to make when she crocheted, right? Yeah, so that's an Afghan to me. But anyway, yeah, the Afghans, I mean, they did stop the Soviets. Did you ever see, there was a movie that was made sometime in the 90s. And I don't know what the title was in Russian, but the entire thing is in Russian, and it's dubbed, subtitled in English, and it's called The Beast in English, and it's about this tank crew that's in Afghanistan, and it's really a very interesting and kind of a trippy movie about what happened to them as they went into this, I guess it was a box canyon if I remember correctly, but they didn't know that until they were like at the end of it, and basically everyone in the tank crew died before the movie was over. I think like the last guy was the guy that had been the commander of the crew, and he died last. So yeah, that is a very interesting and weird kind of movie. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I'd have to check in what kind of movie it is or what the name is. But we were also, my friend in here, we were also arguing that apparently the Cold War didn't need to happen if Patton would march into Moscow. But I was arguing with him that how many men did the Red Army have in Germany by 1945?
It's not really that. I was just bringing up the point that he actually told Congress that's an actual quote from Patton, was like, this war is not over, we haven't taken Moscow. That's his quote when after Hitler was pronounced dead. Whether or not he's actually dead is another discussion.
Yeah, and MacArthur wanted to go after the Soviets as well. So I think that was one of the big issues he had with Truman, which is why he did the old soldiers never die, they just fade away speech and stepped down, resigned or whatever. It was kind of like, well, you can resign or I can, decommission you or whatever. And he chose to resign.
Not sure what you think about McCarthy, personally.
MacArthur.
MacArthur.
Yeah, not Joseph. Not Joseph. No. Not Joseph McCarthy, but Douglas MacArthur. And I have mixed feelings about him because, I mean, he did lead troops against World War I veterans before World War II happened. They were protesting because they weren't being given their pensions or whatever it was they had been promised for serving in World War I. And not only did he have them attacked, but also their wives and so forth, and broke up their camps. They had little tent cities, I guess, basically, they had established. I don't remember which president was in charge at the time and had ordered that, but so
It was before FDR.
Yeah, it was. But as I was reading about this, it seems like he was just a dick, right? But I've also read that he didn't really understand who he was dealing with at the time. He thought they were some kind of Marxists or something, if I recall correctly, and he was perfectly willing to put them all down if need be. I think he had been lied to or something. So I don't really know. I mean,
he just followed his orders.
Well, yeah, but Nuremberg, right? I mean, it hadn't happened
at
the
time. A lot of those guys didn't just follow orders. They kind of got colorful with their orders.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Certainly Patton there. But yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings about MacArthur because, when I was growing up, my dad really thought MacArthur was the shit, and I always liked Eisenhower more as far as the two generals in World War II.
Thing is, yeah, sorry, can I express my thing of MacArthur briefly?
Go for it.
Personally, I find MacArthur one of the most overrated generals in World War II. Mostly because of a thing, the defense of the Philippines in 1942. The forces were like this: 150,000 American soldiers against an invasion force of 130,000 Japanese. You'd think the numbers would compensate the Americans, right? Well, for some reason, the entire American Air Force in the Philippines, apparently it was concentrated in a few points, which the Japanese gleefully bombed to shit, knocking out half of the American Air Force in the Philippines. Then, for some reason, Douglas MacArthur has the bright idea of defending the entirety of the island at once, instead of retreating to several strategic hardpoints, like the island of Corregidor. By the time he actually did that, it was too late. The Japanese overran the entirety of the Philippines. So, perhaps the popularity of MacArthur was not because of his tactics or his genius, but it was because he was the darling of the army, if you know what I mean. In my opinion, I think Chester Nimitz did more than MacArthur.
Well, at the end of the day, Patton's always going to be the man.
Patton actually did a lot of shit. For example, in the Battle of the Bulge, he was... Yeah, sorry.
I was like, the one thing I've always respected the most about Patton was his necessity to actually be able to see the battle unfold in front of him, to be able to better make his decisions. That is something I highly respect even to this day, because not many generals or officers, let alone generals, do that.
Let me tell you a thing. I'm more of a Rommel fanboy, so...
That's something I was going to bring up. It's like, everybody's like, oh, Nazis are evil. Rommel was a patriot. That was his thing. He did not care about the Third Reich. He cared about Germany. Yeah,
but Rommel wasn't a Nazi per se. He was a military man. That's something a lot of people forget. There were a lot. There were people in the Wehrmacht, for example, who had no idea what was going on with the Allgemeine Schutzstaffel, the Allgemeine SS, which were the guys that were the guards at the concentration camps and stuff. And when of course, when Rommel found out what a fucking idiot and madman Adolf Hitler was, he was involved in the plot to assassinate the guy. So, I mean, yeah, I have a great deal of respect for Rommel as well, and he was a brilliant tactician, as as well as a person who had some ethical standards, right?
About Rommel, I want to tell you a thing. We all talk about Rommel as if his military career started in World War II.
Oh, I know. He had the
genius...
Pour le Mérite, the Blue Max from World War One.
Yeah, but you want to know how he started out? He started out as the commander of a mountain battalion, the Württemberg battalion.
Württemberg, yeah.
The Württemberg, yep. In which apparently he claimed in his book, which I have read, the infantry attacks, Infanterie greift an, which is basically a military manual.
Yep, I've read that too.
Yeah, he claims that he had to win the trust of the men by going into hunting clubs. Because apparently the men of the Württemberg only respected dedicated hunters.
Well, the aristocracy in Germany, in the German Empire, were very interested in hunting. I mean, if you are familiar with Rittmeister Manfred Freiherr von Richthofen, better known to us as the Red Baron, there's a reason. Yes. There is a reason that he started naming his squadron the Jaeger squadron, the Jagdgestaffel and all that stuff. All that stuff is based on the word Jaeger, which means hunter in German. And if you have read his book or any of the biographies about him, there's a lot of talk about how he used to go wild boar hunting in Silesia or Schlesien, which is where he was from. Kind of at the, that little indentation on the southeastern part of the German Empire where Czechoslovakia kind of poked into it there. That was inside the German territory there, and that was Silesia there.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, go on.
No, that's all I had to say about it at the moment.
Oh, I see. Well, the thing is, Rommel in World War One actually did some amazing stuff, fighting against the Belgians, the French, the Romanians, the Italians. There's this story of that apparently an entire Italian battalion surrendered to him, which was apparently during the Battle of Caporetto. Because apparently Luigi Cadorna was being a fucking dick to his men. It is a great contrast. On one hand, you have fucking Rommel, a military genius, a father to his men, basically. And then you have Luigi Cadorna. What a scum of a man that was. Want to know how? For example, Berserker. Have you ever heard about that man, Luigi Cadorna?
Never a nice word.
Never a nice word, huh? Never.
Even reading stuff recounted by Italians themselves that served under him, it was never a nice word.
It was because it was fucking deserved. You know what Luigi Cadorna was exactly? He was the supreme commander of all of the Italian armies in World War One. And his idea of improving morale in the army was basically massive punishments and decimations. This guy had more disregarded the lives of his men more than fucking Douglas Haig.
Yeah, there are a lot. I mean, you get some commanders, some officers who are very competent, and you get some who are not. I mean, there is a thing in Hogan's Heroes. Have you ever seen the television show Hogan's Heroes?
I think I've heard about it, but yes, I think so.
So there's one of the episodes where they hatch this scheme where they're going to get Colonel Klink, Commandant Klink, to tell General Burkhalter that there's an old Prussian saying, and Klink interrupts and says, "But I'm not an old Prussian." And Hogan points out General Burkhalter is, So this old Prussian saying allegedly, and I don't know that this is real, it's maybe something they made up for the show, right? And it may not have even been intended to be real. It may have been something that they just made up, in the context of the show itself, that they came up with the idea to tell Klink blah blah blah. But the old Prussian saying was, a soldier is only as good as the officer he serves under. So if you've got a shitty officer, you've got shitty soldiers. And that's not entirely true. I mean, I was in ROTC, and I knew some really incompetent cadets from other universities, because we would come together occasionally for FTXs, field training exercises. Some of these people didn't even know how to shoot an azimuth with a compass, so we would be running around out in the woods not knowing where the hell we were, because these people who were supposed to be our, the people looking at the compass to figure out where we were, didn't know what the fuck they were doing. I mean, I asked one of them, I said, "Haven't you been something about an azimuth?" I don't remember exactly what I said. And he goes, "What's an azimuth?" And I go, "Dude, why are you on the compass if you don't know how to shoot an azimuth?" And he just kind of looked at me stupefied, and I'm like, oh my God, what the fuck? These are the people that are going to be leading our soldiers, and, because I wasn't. Yeah, I mean, fuck.
I mean, I know people in the military, so let me rescue your faith. Those people don't ever last long in combat situations. They think they're in charge, but there's always going to be that grizzled sergeant who's seen it all, who's going to tell them to get their pampered asses to the back of the goddamn squad and let them do their job.
Right,
indeed. But I was gonna tell you a thing. So you were telling the thing of incompetent officers, but this guy, Giovanna, was the supreme commander of the entire Italian army. How did that guy?
Right. Well, I mean,
that bad?
It's a political thing. I mean, whenever you get to be in a position like that, it's because you've been appointed by some dumbass in a political office, right? I mean, we didn't have General of the Army, MacArthur or Eisenhower, until FDR appointed them as such. And so he put Eisenhower in charge of the European theater and MacArthur in charge of the Pacific theater. But the point is, it was a president who put them as the supreme Allied commander in this theater and in that theater. So it was a politician who did it. Fortunately, FDR had some idea of what was going on, and both of those guys were relatively good tacticians. I mean, I assume that FDR had advisors that he actually listened to, unlike some presidents who seem to think they know better than anyone else about everything.
Yeah. So, but even so, imagine this. Want to know what happened after Caporetto? The entire Italian Second Army vanished. It disappeared from the map entirely. With it, can you imagine what happened? That was the end of Luigi Cadorna's career. It was the end because there was no saving face from it. How do you save face from the loss of an entire army? I don't think you do. I don't think you get a free scotch out of it. In the end, replacing him was the best decision ever for the Italian army, because the Italian army's performance improved after he left. Hell, they even beat the Germans and Austrians in Mount Grappa after.
Did you say free scotch?
Well, yeah. Whatever.
Yeah. I'd like some free scotch. I'm actually drinking a bit of single malt right now, Glenlivet, but the idiom is scot-free. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that because it kind of caught my ear.
Yeah, back to Rommel before I get off topic. The thing is, Rommel was a military genius, but he also made some mistakes. Let's not forget about it. For example, have you seen the siege of Tobruk, for instance?
Yeah. I mean, there was a book I read back in high school, I guess, called In Search of the Desert Fox, and it talked a lot about his entire career from, before World War II started. It talked about his career in World War One. It talked about what he did in between the wars, and it talked about World War II and what he did in North Africa and what he did in Normandy and so forth.
Thing is, Tobruk was a fucking bitch to deal with. Basically, an entire fortress city built. Fortress is built by the Italians, by the way. And the thing is that you could not siege that city properly. You want to know why? Because the fucking Royal Navy was there.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you siege a fucking city if it keeps getting shipments from the sea? You know what I mean?
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's impossible to render it via siege. But then again, the first strikes of Rommel on the city were very clumsy to begin with. Speed against an entrenched opponent doesn't work, especially in a city. Mistakes were made. Yeah, mistakes were made. But we gotta admit that he did what he could. Right?
Well, I mean, there is no such thing as a perfect human being. We all make mistakes. I mean, I might have even made one or two a couple of centuries ago. I don't. It's been a while, but no, I'm kind of joking. I'm joking. But yeah, one of the things that I remember from reading the book about Rommel was that this psyop that he did, where he took the tanks and the half tracks and so forth, and the troops themselves, and marched them through this little village several times, where they go back around and come back through, to make the people there and the spies think that their force was much larger than it actually was. And then he had plywood put onto jeeps to make them look like tanks and stuff like that. So he was really doing a lot of psychological warfare there to convince the enemy and the locals that the Afrika Korps had actually more equipment and personnel than it actually did.
Yeah, the thing is, to me, the North African theater considered one of the greatest blunders of Hitler in World War II. Because I'm going to give the argument that in North Africa laid the key to the defeat of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom depended on the Suez Canal in order to connect the British main islands with the rest of the empire, right?
Right.
So, if the Germans took the Suez Canal, all of the shipments between India and Britain would be either cut off, or they'd have to circumvent through the entirety of Africa. You know what I mean? It's a really long delay, if you ask me. Now, after taking the Suez Canal, you know what's there after? The oil fields of Iraq.
Yeah, exactly.
What was the German army starving of mostly? Oil.
Yep, exactly.
So you get that?
My dad's brother was in World War II, and he was in North Africa, and he was in Iran, in Tehran. I don't know exactly what they did there. And then later on, he went off to India, still during World War II. I don't know really much about what he did in Iran or India, but I did kind of talk with him about what he did in North Africa, so I got to hear him. And I showed him this map out of the very book that I was telling you about. And I'm pretty sure the title of it was In Search of the Desert Fox. Anyway, I still have it somewhere. It was a paperback published back during the 70s. And I had showed him this map in the middle of the book, and it probably still shows the indentation of his fingernail as he pointed out to me where he went and where he was stationed and stuff, he just kind of like pushed his finger against it, and his nail drug a kind of an indentation in the image. So he showed me where he had traveled and stuff like that. It was very interesting to get him to talk about it, because a lot of people that have been in war, they don't really want to talk about it after the fact. But he saw that I was interested and I wanted to know about the history, and so he told me, some of the stuff that he had experienced and things like that.
Indeed, but the thing is, how you call it? I was gonna tell you a thing that the desert fox, as you call him, well, he may have actually gotten past Suez and gotten into Iraq. If you get into Iraq, you know what also falls? Turkey. Because Turkey was neutral at the time, But with the German army approaching from the south, Turkey would be forced to open its borders to the Third Reich, which would mean that the resources from North Africa could be transferred through Turkey back to Europe. You have now a supply line of precious oil coming from Iraq to Berlin. Now, the problem lies with this. He could have done it if he had the fucking means to do it, which he never did. While Rommel was continuously asking for new generation German tanks for his forces, guess what the fucking Axis High Command sent him always? Shitty Italian tanks. Italian tanks that were not worth a damn against the British. Because have you seen the M1340s, for instance? Even a weak anti-tank rifle could penetrate those.
They were no match to American tanks. They basically would rip through them like tissue paper.
The M13s, yes. They were fucking horrendous. Also, have you ever heard, Giovanna, have you ever heard of the CV-33? Or not really? Because the CV, you know what it stands for? It stands for Carro Veloce, which means literally fast tank. Carro Veloce, which means fast tank. And you want to know what the biggest weapons of that thing was? A pair of machine guns.
Oh, for fuck's sake. That's like a goddamn troop transport. That's not even a tank.
It's just an armored car, basically, with a what do they call them? Armored personnel carrier or something that would have no big gun, but just a machine gun instead.
Now, the problem with the thing is, as a scouting tank, it could work. But the thing is, the Italian High Command used them as the main battle tank, mostly, apart from the M13s. And when I see that, I'm like, when you guys seriously wanted to fight a world war with this?
I don't know why anyone ever thought Mussolini was intelligent at all.
Bumbling buffoon.
I wasn't aware that people thought that.
What a bumbling buffoon.
Well, there had to be somebody who thought he was intelligent, or else he wouldn't have been put in charge of things and become Il Duce.
So the Fiat Ansaldo M3040, and I'm searching, the thing only weighed 13 tons, which is very light. Very light for tank standards. How much is the weight for the Sherman, for instance? Hang on.
I would guess to say double that at least.
And we all talk shit about the Sherman most of the time. A lot of people like to talk shit about the Sherman. But when I see that and I compare it to the Italian tanks, I'm like, what the fuck are you telling? The Sherman is awesome.
Oh yeah, the Sherman also had those, I don't remember what they were called, but My brother built a model of one time, and it had this kind of metal thing on the front of it that had like blades that would cut down the brush as it was, coming upon the brush. It would cut the brush out of the way so that it didn't get bogged down in that stuff. I mean, obviously that was not really an issue in North Africa, but say like in Europe it would have been.
Yep. The ones you told were used in Normandy, especially in order to clear the bocage. Because smartly, the German army established a key of defensive networks around the bocage. You know what I mean? It's basically, that thing was a kill zone after a kill zone after a kill zone after a kill zone.
And all those, I don't know what they call them, but they're basically giant caltrops. Those big X-shaped things with those things.
Yep. With the issue is the Allies only managed to advance after clearing the bocage. And the only way to clear the bocage was using those Shermans you mentioned. Also, I've been checking the weight of the Sherman Berserker. It's 38 metric tons. You compare it against the Italian tank, which was 13 tons. I'm really sorry, but I'm really sorry, but if I were an Italian tank crew and I saw a Sherman in front of me, I'd be like, well, guess I'm fucking dead now. Guess I'm fucking dead because my fucking tank is shit. Makes me wonder what the fuck was Italy thinking at the time. But then again, German diplomacy always fucking works. So they somehow managed always to get corpses of allies, if you know what I mean.
Well, when I mentioned you have leaders, politicians who put people in positions of authority in the military. Some of these leaders, some of these politicians are competent and some are not. And it's been kind of a running gag for a long time that Hitler was one of these people who thought he knew better than the generals, in spite of the fact that he never rose above the rank of corporal himself. He was famous or notorious for not listening to his advisors and stuff.
Yeah, the thing is, the whole thing of the invasion of France gave Hitler a massive ego boost. Let's call it like that. Because he had one good stroke. He had the idea of attacking a fort called Evergreen. Not sure if you know about it. Evergreen is a fortress in Belgium, in which it controlled a key junction, which the German armies needed to cross, right? But you could not cross it with the fortress in the middle. So Hitler checked the plans, and he said, "The ground of the fortress is as straight as a field. The paratroopers can land on it." And that's what they did. They landed paratroopers on the fortress, knocked out the guns of the fortress, and the entire fort surrendered when the first German tanks approached.
Right. Well, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right?
Yes, it is. But then
one that seems more fitting is even a blonde squirrel finds a nut every now and
then. Yep. But the thing is, the real problem started after the failure of Operation Typhoon. Typhoon was the last offensive on Moscow, which ultimately failed. Guess what Hitler did after the failure of the offensive? Around like a lot of the German generals of the time were fucking sacked. Von Rundstedt sacked. Von Bock sacked. Guderian sacked. Everyone was fucking sacked. All because and even one of the generals was condemned to death. Want to know what this general did? He retreated his forces from Crimea after a Soviet counterattack was about to cut him off. Which is funny because in the end, the orders of the Führer contributed a lot to the demise of the Wehrmacht. Not even sure what the fuck was he thinking in that regard. But
Which general was that?
Meth heads don't make good decisions if you're talking about Hitler.
Well, yeah, that's another thing. Hitler was definitely on methamphetamines, and with excuse me, with extensive and or long-term use of methamphetamines, you develop a condition known as methamphetamine psychosis, which is characterized by delusions and paranoia. I mean, yeah, look, Hitler was pretty fucking paranoid, obviously. That's part of the whole, the whole Nazi Germany regime was characterized by paranoia. It was creating this boogeyman of the Jews and the international bankers and stuff to turn them into some kind of worldwide conspiracy, and they had to be put down. That's a clear sign of paranoia.
Yep. Also, you were asking which general was condemned to death for this thing, right?
Right, yeah.
Well, yeah, where can I post them? Because I found them.
Just post it in. Do you have permission to post in the text channel for voice just above us there? I think you do.
Text channel. Oh, yes, here. Well, here.
Right above the stream.
This guy.
Yeah.
This guy, General Hans Graf von Sponeck. He was the commander of the 17th Army Corps. And by the time he was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross.
Right.
So that's a very huge award.
I've never heard of this guy. I'm gobsmacked by that. But I do know that. What did you say his name was again?
Hans Graf von Sponeck.
Graf von Sponeck. That means Count of Sponeck. Yeah, so He was a count. He was an aristocrat back before the German Empire was forced to cease to exist and turn into a republic with the Weimar Republic.
Yep. The thing is, Sponeck was how you call it? Sponeck was leading was one of the commanders in Crimea during the siege of Sevastopol, right? When the Russians launched a counterattack in order to try to relieve Sevastopol, his regiment or his army had to fall back, or else risk annihilation. Hitler didn't take it very well. And in the end, he ended up being condemned to death, and he was killed in the 23rd of July of 1944, 2 years after his initial official condemnation. Sponeck was tried in front of none other than Hermann Goering, guilty of disobedience to a superior officer and given the death sentence.
Fat Hermann. Von Richthofen never liked Goering.
Yeah, did he have a beef with him or something?
Back in World War I, von Richthofen, the Red Baron, he was the guy that was in charge of the hunter squadrons, the flying circus and all that. And he didn't regard Goering as, I forget exactly what was his beef with Goering, but it seems like he thought Goering was too full of himself, which seems to have been the case, right?
I mean, Well, and even then, I'd say out of all the Nazi leadership, he wasn't exactly the worst. Even if he was full of himself and living a very lavish life, let's call it like that. But the thing is, there was a story of Hermann Goering that is very funny. You know what he said to one of the newspapers of the Reich when asked about the possibility of the enemy launching strategic bombings against Germany? He said, "I promise you that not a single bomber shall hit Germany." And I'm gonna say this, quote unquote. If that happens, quote, if that happens, you will start calling me Meyer from now on, quote. It's not surprising when the Game of Hearts of Iron 4 calls him Hermann Meyer instead of Hermann Goering.
I remember that quote, yeah. I think you've mentioned it before.
Yeah, probably. I mean, probably in that end, but it's whenever I think of that, I'm like, you're so fucking full of yourself, Goering. But then again, he was also responsible for the disaster of Stalingrad in a sense, promising he could build a fucking air bridge on the city, which ended up costing a lot of planes to the Wehrmacht for nothing. Well, what else? Also, by the way, I'd love to talk more, but I gotta get going. It's late here.
Yeah, we've been going now for 2 hours and 16 minutes, and I generally would like to keep these about 2 hours, roughly. I mean, certainly if my ISP were cooperating with me and playing nice, you know, it might be possible to go for longer. But honestly, there are now, let me look again. There are now 1, 2, 3, 4 different stream videos up on my channel, all named the same thing. One of them is 19 minutes and 28 seconds, one is 22 minutes and 16 seconds, one is 12 minutes and 40 seconds, and then the current one, which says live now, so it doesn't have a time. Let me see if it will tell me. Oh, it says elapsed time 34 minutes and 57 seconds, which will obviously be 35 by the time we're done. So yeah, I guess I had hoped that maybe my boyfriend would join us tonight, and I also I thought maybe Kraut of Kraut and Tea would join us. He has said occasionally that he would come in, and the first time he forgot about it, and so I guess the second time was when we had our first big disconnection issue with the ISP, and the third time he apologized later, but didn't give any reason why, and that's fine. I mean, I don't need any explanation. But I would like to have him in sometime, eventually.
Well, yeah.
I mean, he's a good YouTuber. I have been subscribed to him for almost as long as he's had his channel, maybe a month or two after he started it. And unfortunately, he's not making videos at the moment. So, hey, Kraut, if you're listening to this live or later once I upload the video, I want you back on YouTube, dude. Come back to YouTube and make videos again. You make great fucking videos. You guys agree with me, right?
Yep. Listen, I do agree with you in that regard, but I really need to get going because I gotta brush the teeth and all that shenanigans before I go to bed.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us, and dream well and all that stuff. Buona notte.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good night. See ya.
Bye-bye. Okay, so, well, there we go. It's just me here now, and as you all may or may not be aware, if you've been watching, I don't think anyone is watching the current stream except me. Yeah, there have been issues with my ISP connections. I went into some detail about it earlier in one of the earlier streams or earlier parts, chapters maybe of this stream. Like I have said in both the live chat and in a voice here on the video, I'm going to be taking down all 4 of these streams and putting up a video instead, because as I was streaming, I was also recording. So I do have the video recorded, or it's, you know, it's recording now, and it says the total time is 2 minutes 20 seconds, 2 hours 20 seconds and 30 seconds now. Blah, whatever. 2 hours 20 minutes and 35 seconds. So anyway, thanks for watching. Those of you few who did look in during the live part of the stream. I know there weren't a lot of people who did, and that's fine. But yeah, I understand entirely that people would get frustrated with the stream disconnecting and reconnecting and so forth and so on. It seems that at one point we had 14 people watching, which was pretty cool. Much more than I would normally get in a stream. So that was in the second chapter, so to speak, of the stream. I am going to go ahead and say good night and everything. So for Republic News, this is Liviana, and I will say until next time, have fun but stay safe. Hopefully by next time I will have some kind of resolution to this ISP fuckery and can do an actual stream without any interruptions. I mean, it's really obviously they're fucking with me at this point, because like I said earlier, I've had for the past couple of months or so, it's been very touch and go with my connection. It sometimes has dropped down to 3G, sometimes down to 1G, and sometimes I've had no connection at all. And like today and yesterday, it's been showing 4G the whole time, but it absolutely refuses to allow me to connect my computer to it. So I've had to resort to using Ethernet instead, which means using my smartphone to connect, which is not entirely satisfactory. Fortunately, the amount of data I use on the smartphone is also covered by my Wi-Fi plan, so I'm not in any danger of going over my allotted limited data package by using the smartphone. So anyway, as I said, until next time, have fun but stay safe. For Republic News, this is Liviana signing off.